You ever run into an old friend, someone you haven't seen for a couple of years, and you get this weird feeling that something's off? I mean, they look the same, but that spark, that person you knew, it feels like they've just faded away. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible process that can cause this gradual erosion of the self. Let's get into it.
So this whole idea kicks off with a really powerful story. It's about a friend who, used to have strong opinions, a real solid sense of who he was. But now it seems like he's asking for permission just to have a thought. Every decision is shaky, like he's waiting for an okay that he never quite gets. It's this quiet, really unsettling change that, honestly, a lot of us have seen happen to someone we love.
And that's the big question, right? What is actually going on here? Because it's not some big, dramatic blow-up. It's way more sneaky than that. It's a process the source calls a gradual erosion. So how does a confident, self-assured person end up a shadow of their former self?
To figure that out, we first have to put a name to what we're seeing. When you can define a hidden problem like this, you can start to see how it's built, see its architecture, and most importantly, you can learn how to spot it.
Okay, so the term we're going to use here is gradual erosion. And as you can see, the key words are small concessions and softened boundaries. This isn't about one giant fight that changes everything. No, it's more like 1,000 tiny paper cuts over many years that, when you add them all up, lead to this catastrophic loss of who you are.
Now look, the point of all this isn't to point fingers or play the blame game. It's about something way more useful. Unmasking the patterns. We're going to map out the territory, we're going to look at the invisible psychological operating system that runs behind these behaviors, so you can see it working clearly long before the real damage is done.
We're going to zero in on 3 specific recurring patterns. You can think of them as the main tools that really drive this whole erosion process. And understanding how they work, that's absolutely the key to protecting yourself.
All right, let's dive into the first one. And this one's kind of insidious because it preys on our best instincts, our desire to help the people we care about. It's the trap of what we call chronic victimhood.
This is all about someone who seems to be in a permanent state of crisis. They're just always overwhelmed, always struggling, and it feels like the world is constantly out to get them. So what do? You jump in, you try to solve the problem, you offer support, but you start to notice that any relief you provide, it just never, ever lasts.
And here's how you can spot it in the wild. No matter how many fires you put out for them, a brand new one starts up immediately. In every story, they are the innocent one, the sufferer. And here, this is the crucial tell. If you ever gently suggest that maybe they have a tiny bit of control over their own problems, bam! Suddenly you're the one attacking them. The whole story flips, and before you know it, you've been cast as the new villain.
Okay, so where does it go from there? Well, things start to get more active. The next couple of patterns are all about control. They basically turn the relationship into an emotional battlefield, where your own need for peace and stability is used against you.
First up, manufactured conflict. Ever been in a huge fight that just seemed to pop up out of nowhere, maybe over something tiny that happened weeks ago? That's step 1. Step 2 is keeping that awful, tense feeling going, sometimes for days. The goal? To just wear you down until you get to step 3, where you just give in. You make concessions, you agree to things you wouldn't normally, just to make the emotional warfare stop.
So, how do you deal with that? Well, the counter strategy is actually pretty simple, though I'll admit it's not always easy to pull off. You have to refuse to negotiate under pressure. Just make a hard and fast rule for yourself. We do not make big decisions about our jobs, our money, our lives, unless things are calm, full stop.
All right, the next tactic is emotional withdrawal. And you've probably felt this one. It's when the warmth and affection in the relationship just shuts off, like a light switch. You get the cold shoulder, the one-word answers, the classic "I'm fine" when they're obviously not. This whole thing is designed to throw you into what the source calls reactive pursuit. That's when you start scrambling, asking what's wrong, what did I do, desperately trying to fix a problem you can't even see. And in that moment, they have all the power.
But why? Why do people do this? This is where it gets really fascinating. One source explains these behaviors as subconscious stress tests. The random fights or the sudden coldness, they're not actually random. They're a way of testing your emotional floor. They're subconsciously poking at you to see if your confidence is real, if it's a solid foundation, or if it's just a mask that's going to crack under a little bit of pressure.
Okay, we've seen the problem, we've mapped out the patterns, the traps. Now for the most important part. How do you get out?
How do you reclaim your agency and start rebuilding that self-respect? Here's the first thing you really need to get. These aren't just bad days or a rough patch. They are stable, repeating patterns, and they all have the same basic design. They destroy you through repetition. Any single incident might seem small, forgettable, but each one is a withdrawal from your self-respect bank account, and over time, that account gets completely drained.
And this right here, this lays it all out, plain and simple. It boils down to a fundamental question you have to ask yourself. Is this a partnership, built on shared growth and mutual respect? Or has it turned into an extraction opportunity where your energy, your time, your very sense of self is being consumed? Just figuring out which one of these you're in, that's the giant first step.
And this right here is the big takeaway. This is the moment everything changes. Because once you can see the pattern, once you can name it, the whole dynamic shifts. You're not just a victim of circumstance anymore. You become an agent. You're someone who can make conscious choices about what happens next, based on what's really going on.
And let's be real, making those choices, it's tough. It can mean having really hard conversations, setting boundaries that feel super uncomfortable at first, maybe even walking away. But as the source puts it so powerfully, the short-term pain of doing what needs to be done is always better than the long-term irreversible destruction of doing nothing.
So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. After everything we've talked about today, what is one boundary? It could be big, it could be small, that you're just not going to let slide anymore. Answering that question for yourself, that isn't just a mental exercise. It's the first real step you take to reclaim your ground. Thanks for joining me on this one.